Welcome to Go For Side Effects. I'm your host, Kevin Simon. You all know my co-host, John. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
We got Miss Tower back. Venus, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well this evening.
Okay.
But like many other Gulf War veterans, you don't know what tomorrow will be like.
That's right. I totally agree.
Yeah.
We told y'all we'd bring her back in a month. I kept my word. We're back with you. Because at the end, we started getting fiery and we started like getting into information. But let's get into what you think about the PACT Act and compared to what y'all went through back in the early 90s.
Okay, lesson learned going into the PACT Act was why did the PACT Act embrace veterans from Vietnam, the operations in between, Gulf War, and Iraqi freedom, and several operations after that? Well, they did because of the cancers. And if you look under the presumptions, the PACT Act now included cancers that was not included in the original presumptions for Vietnam vets. For the presumptions of Gulf War vets, they didn't include any cancers on the legislative first 33 presumptive. And in the PACT Act, it's mostly different cancers, and there's only two issues that is non-cancerous, which is has to do with respiratory system and has to do with the GI tract. Okay, so I'm blessed at this point in my life. I have not come up positive for any cancers. Although they keep trying to scare me with cervical cancers. That's a bit abnormal, has been abnormal since the Gulf War, but it hasn't gotten into a stage to be diagnosed as a stage 1 cancer of any type. Now, so I went to apply for the PACT Act, and because I didn't have any cancers, I only had these other two, respiratory and GI, to apply to. And so I'm going like, it's kind of complicated just doing it straight over the internet, unless you're really a techie. But if that wasn't your field of expertise, it's a bit challenging.
Yes,
so I went to the same people I went to when I put in my claim, even then as a legislative aide, lobbying in Washington. I was sponsored first by the Vietnam Vets of America. And they said, no, we're going to stick by you. You're not going to get twisted like we did. We're going to tell Congress and VA that these are the illnesses that we have come back with. Okay, so now after that, I go to looking at the PACT Act, with my DAV representative, and said, I've had a number of different illnesses. What can I apply for under the PACT Act? Well, problem is under the PACT Act, under pulmonary respiration issues, there's only bronchitis. And so I said, of course I've had bronchitis and I've had pneumonia. One tends to lead to the other. And he said, you can't do that. I'm saying, why? It's just because you got rated for asthma. So because I got rated for asthma, I can only do a supplemental to say this is secondary to asthma. Now I have bronchitis. Okay, well, I can't get it as a primary, so we applied for it as secondary. And then the other issue was under diarrhea, which I tried for when my Gulf War claim. I got a diagnosis of IBS. Now, that is the killer to this whole undiagnosed rating scheme. As soon as a physician gives you a diagnosis of any of your illnesses, it's no longer diagnosed. So if they say your diarrhea is due to IBS, you now have a diagnosis and you can't go after Gulf War claim. And that's what I learned going into the PACT Act. What I should have done when I went to my physician, I should have said, is this really just IBS, or is it IBS-like? Because if I could have gotten him to say, this is idiopathic, and idiopathic is a key word, which means it's not normal, but it's something like this other disease. And if I had that in my notes, instead of a specific diagnosis of hypotension, of IBS, of asthma, of endometriosis. As soon as I got those diagnoses, it killed my claim. If I had just guided my doctors, because they were lost. And 90 to 95, until those regulations had come out in Congress, until the regulations had been made for guidelines for VA benefit adjudicators, it was just hit and miss. And I would have just asked my doctor to say, well, can you argue with me that it's not idiopathic? We don't know what caused it. It's something like this disorder.
Right.
They probably would have said yes.
But it all boils down to the terminology they're using.
It's a terminology. And when you look at Gulf War studies, they are written likely, unlikely, is their how they measure things. So is it likely something happened to you, or is it unlikely? And unlikely may answer legislative questions. It may answer all these lovely reports and studies they did, but it doesn't address how the adjudicators have to respond to you. So I could go, I used to come up with a report of a study, and I said, I have these symptoms of this study. And they go, well, it's likely that these exposures did that to you. Now the adjudicator looks in his hands, and from how they're directed, they don't go by likely or unlikely. They look for a word, a diagnosis. And if there's anything in there that's a written diagnosis and not idiopathic or unsure of diagnosis, the vet will not win the claim on that issue.
Right.
So
go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
I was going to ask Venus, so our viewers have a little understanding if they perhaps missed the last time we were on. You were a legal aid when you were in the service, yes?
I came out of the Gulf War. I had been in 16 years. I had been trained as a medic. I had been a civilian EMT. I was a military laboratory technician. And then on the civilian side, I was still going to school for environmental law. So I saw pollution in the civilian sector and how it impacts civilians, okay, or how it affects farmers and how the law adjudicated that. Then you mix in my experiences in the military. When I went to the Gulf, I was looking for the dirt. I knew we were in a dirty environment. I knew we were getting too many shots at one time. When in history did the human organism get so many shots before deployment? The odds were just out there from studies from the VAERS report on children that when they get multiple vaccines in one period of time, they're more likely to develop other problems. Okay, so this is nothing new when I went there. And of course, because I knew how dirty this environment is, I'm trying to take care of myself. I am I went into the Gulf War as an environmental paralegal. So my lawyer was an environmental lawyer, and I was his paralegal assistant. Okay. Now, after a couple weeks in theater, I got snatched up by somebody else, and I ended up being a contract law uh, um, uh, legal assistant. Okay, that doesn't mean I stood in a building or a hard structure at all. Now I'm going out forward to infantry units to supply material and documents that had to get signed, uh, hook up communication satellite phones so they could talk to the Pentagon on materials that we were using from foreign governments in the theater. So I was in a dirty environment. There were times I slept in I remember one thing was a concrete sewer casting. And that was the only thing we had for cover. So I slept in that. That's because I'm traveling from point A to point B, and the helicopter that was supposed to move me got reassigned to something else. So you just carry on. My cohorts at that time thought it was very funny to introduce me to one of those sand spiders.
No,
Did you see them?
no, thank you. No, hell
Oh yeah.
no. Hell
Wait, what's
no.
up? Move over. And I look down at my foot. From my foot to my knee is the entire length of this camel spider
Hell no.
sitting on my knee. I'm looking, I said, well, first I thought it was plastic and it was dead. So I stared at it for a moment. And people around me started running around. And I said, oh, it's just a toy. You guys aren't going to make me pee my pants. They said, no, look again. It's alive. So it moved. So, okay. So I looked around for a booklet on the ground and I gently nursed it off my foot. I said, I'm not going to upset you. But that's what I was saying. There was another time talking about exposures to environmental chemicals in the air. There was a chemical attack. Alarms were going off. I was hearing communication from the Czechs that they were saying there was positive of chemicals in our environment. But guess what? I didn't have my mob suit. I didn't have my mob suit on me because my boss, a lawyer, said, oh, you don't need it. And you're going to go to point A to point B, and you don't need to carry any mob. I didn't have my weapon, didn't have anything. And that day he wanted me to show up in civilian clothes. So I'm wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. Alarms are going off. But what really upset me was when I got to where my officers were at. They were locked in a bunker and they wouldn't open the door for me. They said, we're not going to get exposed. So I was locked out in the environment, breathing whatever was in the environment. So I was canary in the coal cage. They figured if I didn't fall over, they could come out.
Well, I can tell you this, Venus. The first time that, because we, like in the Navy, because on supply ship, they decide that the E3 and below bosun mates was, they're called seaman recruit and all that stuff. So I had to go stand watch, and it was a road that was probably about a mile down. There was a gate, and I stood with French and Britain and all them guys in France, and we were all standing out there. It was the first time in my life that, they come over the loudspeakers and they do the prayer real loud, the thing real loud. I was like, well, what the hell is that? All them guys are laughing at me, and they can all talk to each other, but my ass don't understand a word them son of a bitches are saying because I don't speak their language. Right. And then one of them was like, that's their prayer.
That's a call to prayer.
Yeah, a call to prayer. But, being a 19-year-old kid, you have no idea what the hell that is. And then you go back to the ship, and then the guys are telling you, did you hear the ship alarm going off? I mean, that's the stuff.
Couldn't.
Right. People back and forth, they kept saying it was false alarm. Most of the time, ours really went out went off like 3 times out at sea. So, all that stuff. But I want to jump forward to the VA again, because the thing that you struck me is when you said about IBS, and you were like, no, because of the diarrhea. I met half people that have diarrhea. I met half of them that are really constipated. But with me, in my records, in my discharge, it says digestive disorder. That was another word for IBS. So I filed on it. They denied me that. I'm not going to go back and ask for them to go back and do anything. And go ahead, John.
You file your own? Did you file your own claims, Venus, or did you have
No.
somebody do them for you?
I had a DAV agent do it for me, because the people who first got award of Gulf War illness, they had used an agent. And the adjudicators know when they're looking at your paperwork whether you're doing it alone or whether you're being sponsored by an organization.
Oh, that's very true, and that's why I tell everybody, don't do it alone.
Right.
Okay, so
one, like we were talking earlier, you get a few words screwed up, or you use a misterminology, and you are just hosed.
right, exactly. I mean, mine, because the word B12 wasn't put in there, I kept getting denied. Then finally, the VA guy called me and said, whoever's doing your claim, tell them just to put B12 deficiency, and you'll get it approved. So I did. I got it approved. But that's the one thing that when I went to the kidney doctor, I went this Monday, and she was like, we need to keep you at your EEFGR at 61. It's not going to go up. So we need to keep it where it's at. Let's don't go up. This was the first doctor that I love my neurologist, great guy. I love my my general physician, whatever you call him.
Primary care.
Yeah, primary care. But this doctor was the first doctor that looked over at me, and she asked me what war I was in. When I told her Desert Storm and have she heard about it, she goes, I am literally going through the books, and I'm going to start looking at it, because a lot of us have kidney diseases. Kidney disease is not just, going into kidney failure like they're saying I am. What it means is kidney stones, blockage, always getting
inflammation.
Yes, there's so much in the kidney disease, but a lot of us have it. And I'm going to tell all y'all, go ask when you get your blood work done. They don't do this. You got to ask for your EEFGR to be checked. It's important, especially if you have kidney stones, because she believes maybe the kidney stones. Because I told her, I said, well, I drink Dr. Pepper. And she was like, how much you drink? I told her, she's like, that's not going to affect it. I told her, okay, well, what if you have a couple of beers a week? That's not going to affect it. She said, whatever is affecting y'all's kidneys, there's a lot of us out there. But I was so impressed that she seemed like she cared, genuinely cared. I was in there an hour and a half with a doctor at the VA.
Mhm.
That's a really long time.
Right.
So that's somebody who really is interested.
But so I asked her this question, because I even asked my primary care. She said, are you a part of the PACT Act? I said, look, I was told I don't have to file on the PACT Act by my primary care, because everything I fall under already falls under Gulf War illness. Have you heard of that, Venus?
Well, I'm just saying it's not part of presumptives. But some adjudicators do recognize it. But like I said, it's kind of a hit and miss on that, and it shouldn't be.
Right. And I would say with anybody that has any cancer, file on it.
Any cancer.
Even if you're at 100%, go file on it. because I'm
Right.
telling each and every one of y'all, if you do not, and you die from that cancer, your spouse doesn't get any of your benefits.
Right.
Unless the elderly benefits, of course, your spouse gets. But I, I, I think, to me, in the very beginning, I did think the PACT Act was a piece of shit for us, for Desert Storm vets.
Mhm.
Not for post 9/11, not for Camp Lejeune, but I understand the cancers. I'm glad the cancers are in there. But there should have been a whole lot more in the PACT Act that they wiped out. They should have never taken out sarin gas, mustard gas, anthrax shot, PT tabs, malaria, any of that stuff. But
That's true.
right, and that's the problem that I have with the PACT Act. And even my freaking senator was high-fiving on the freaking floor that he got pushed down. You know what? Don't wear them pins. I'm telling y'all, don't wear them pins with the American flag. Because if I run into you, my ass is going to say something to you. I promise you. But, with that being said, uh, I think the thing that irks a lot of us, and maybe Venus, this is where I want to get your intel, is your VA doctor will tell you one thing. But
If they tell you.
Yeah, but they write down a different thing.
That's true. And for many years, I think for the first 20 years, as soon as I left a VA appointment, whether it was in a CBOC clinic or it was at a medical center, on my way out, I would stop at release of information. And at that time, now they're trying to do it electronically, but I still find it more efficient that I'm already at a facility to sign a release to get a copy of my medical record for that appointment, because I'll forget later on. So that was my habit. I go into an appointment, then on my way out, I'd say I want a copy of my exam, my nursing notes from this day. And they say you'd have to sign a release. I signed the release for the day, and like 3 weeks later, paper copy would come. And technically, if you know a month that you were at a facility, you can ask for your nursing notes, your doctor's notes, because actually you get more information off the nursing notes than you do the doctor's notes. And it's also good if you did any medical tests, any urinalysis, any radiology, that you ask for a copy of that too. And radiology, radiology PET scans. I'm trying to think. There's been SPECT scans, CAT scans, MRIs. Now they send it to you on a CD.
Yeah.
And which makes no sense because everybody's taking the CDs, putting it in the computer, turning it into a thumb drive, and just have that. But they sent me out just the other day another CD, so they haven't used them up, I guess. But that's what you need. Also, I found out in applying for the PACT Act, I had completed the Gulf War registry when I was working in DC. I was going to the VA hospital in Washington, that medical center, because the secretary said, "This is my star hospital here, my blue ribbon hospital." I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll do the registry." So I completed the registry, and I went to get my registry information for the PACT Act. They can't find it. And so, I don't think I'm alone. That if you go back and look for your registry information, which is supposed to exist, you might not be able to find it.
Right. And I'll tell you another thing that kind of pisses me off. Everybody was like, "Oh, make sure you file by August the 14th or 16th, whatever it was." And they'll back pay you all the way to that date. And when it first packed out came out, you could have filed in freaking August the 16th of this year or August the 10th of this year, and they back pay you a year. Well, shit, are they going to back pay any of us that's been filed for 20 something years? No.
Some people who have gotten before after they filed, they got denied, they went for an appeal, and they asked for a hearing in front of a judge. Now, used to be in person, but now it's a Zoom meeting, and it's usually 24 months if you get granted before the judge. But I tell you, go before the judge, because the judges are human.
And the judges are for the vets.
They're for the vets. They don't care what it's called. It's your quality of life. It's not whether you've been diagnosed for example, chronic fatigue syndrome. There were so many people that were suffering with chronic fatigue syndrome that when I first met in the 90s, that's how they reacted. These lively, up and going people, young and old, suddenly are too exhausted to stay awake. They finish their work during the day. They don't even have the energy to drive home at night. Chronic fatigue syndrome. So I got in front of getting involved in a study because the VA would not do an examination for chronic fatigue. DOD would not do an examination for chronic fatigue. So I had to go to a government study that was looking at people with chronic fatigue. And when I told them I was a veteran, they put me ahead of the line, and that's how I got it. Studies are still out there. So I tell people, if you have a symptom that's not being addressed, look at going to a study. Yes, you're going to have to drive a longer way. They will cover your gas. Sometimes they do even cover housing for a day or two that you're doing the study. But once you get that documentation, it's not even so much for your primary care or your specialist where you live. It's for the adjudicator. And when the adjudicator sees that you have gone through a study, these unbiased people said you have these problems, you're more likely to win your claim.
Yeah.
Well, now, so for chronic fatigue, and I've stated this on this program before, for chronic fatigue, when I talked to my VA provider, she explained chronic fatigue is a diagnosis of exclusions. I said, okay. So she said, we don't have a rheumatologist for you, so we have to send you to a civilian one. Civilian one requested my paperwork, and they said, we got nothing for you. I didn't even go to see him. I never visited one person. The doctor just said, this is what they said. And I don't, so I never talked to a human being about chronic fatigue. She goes, they can't do anything for you. So I didn't have to do anything. And I'm rated at hell. I think I'm rated at that for like 60%,
Well,
because there's days I can't even keep my damn eyes open. I struggle. So, I mean, it's a diagnosis of exclusions. I said, okay, so let's start going through the exclusions. And I didn't even have to do any of it.
well,
All they did was whoever, and I have no idea who it was that looked at my paperwork. This is some rheumatologist in Des Moines, Iowa.
I never went to a rheumatologist. I got diagnosed by the neurologist with chronic fatigue. But the funny thing is, in my paperwork from the military, it says chronic fatigue. By the time I got I started exhibiting the symptoms 3 months after Desert Storm. And I mean, I could go in there and say, look, go back to 1992. And it's all in the paperwork from my doctor on my ship. My doctor on my ship, everything that I have that's covered under there was already covered, but they denied it all the way up until 2018.
And at least that was in your medical records, because what the DOD did to me was they said, we don't We don't even have specialty clinics, which was false because Walter Reed had specialty clinics on Gulf War illness, but First Army was telling me they didn't. So the first 5 years after Gulf War, while I was sick, they were sending me to the VA. I was still on active duty, but they sent me to the VA.
Wow.
hmm
And for me, you know, I want people who are not in the Gulf War or have never been in the Gulf War or civilians who are listening to the program. We're not whining. What we're telling y'all is this this isn't a Gulf War illness. It isn't a Gulf War syndrome. This isn't a Gulf War side effects. To me, it's a Gulf War disease because they don't know what caused it. Oh, well, no, take that back. Their asses know what caused it. They just won't tell us what caused it. And they could have taken this. They could have taken everything that they knew and did it right then and there and started healing us. But they didn't. They held it from us.
Yeah.
In medicine, okay, we're going out of from the United States to the Middle East. Where is travel medicine? There are so many people, like leishmaniasis was one. You're not going to get it stateside in most of our military bases around the world. You're going to get it in the Middle East. Your average specialist won't even know about it. That was something that physicians, even today in travel medicine, they'll ask you, were you around someone that had malaria? Were you around someone that had dengue fever? They ask those questions, and we still have these problems that look like other illnesses, but it hasn't been ruled out through travel medicine. Why? DOD has never had travel medicine. They have infectious disease, but they're rare out of 200 DOD facilities. You know, they only have like 25 infectious disease physicians in practicing. They have a lot of them doing research, but that's all they have practicing. So veterans aren't even being asked the right questions because they're seeing the wrong specialists. I say we are OSHA accidents, occupational exposures. That covers, OSHA looks at us as an organism. Are we getting chemicals? Are we getting vaccines? Are we getting what is in our food? What is in our clothing? What are we touching? Occupational medicine looks at that, but still they have occupational medicine, OSHA regulations didn't even come into the Department of Defense until 1995. So people didn't know they could put in an occupational violation to today. They still keep that very quiet, but that does exist now. It didn't exist before then.
Now I have a question for y'all, and when my brain works, it goes 90-0. But the other day I was sitting there and I got done taking a shower, got done, I got out. Y'all ever notice how oily your skin is?
That didn't happen to me, but to my battle buddy, who's also a Gulf War advocate. He had more of the dermatological signs. He had oily skin. He had rashes. He would have bruises that come and go. So even though I didn't have it, I looked over at my battle buddy, who actually was taking care of me as a medical assistant, because Gulf War did not offer medical assistance until just recently, caretaking assistance. So we had to take care of each other. And I saw those symptoms. And yes, they're still going on, and he's still suffering with it.
Yeah, I was noticing the other day because I was like, man, my face feels really oily. So I mean, but I've always been kind of told, man, your face is really oily or your hair is really oily, and It's just I don't know. I mean, maybe people out there that's listening could answer yes or no on that. I would like to know. I think for me, my biggest problem is that Bush knew it, his administration knew it, Clinton's knew it, Bush again. Everybody knew it. Everybody out there knew that what we were suffering from, because the VA's got to be I mean, they've been studying over 600,000 of us veterans since 1995. And the VA had to go to them and say, hey, look, these guys here got this, and this. But they just keep swept it under the rug. To me, why do you have to sweep something under the rug? I mean, it's out there now.
Well, there's a lot of people used to say we are the DOD's guinea pigs, weaponizing, because DOD research will weaponize anything, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a bird or a dolphin, we'll weaponize it. So in weaponizing it, they know the impact on small animals, large animals, humans, and children. And what I keep going back to is that the Regal report, it goes into so much detail on when Saddam was our friend. We opened up and we gave him all this material, thinking he would use it on somebody else. Okay, then when we went in there in the 90s, we're going like, we've got to destroy it before he starts using it on our troops. So the the misdirection is, whether it was chemical or biological agents, when we were trying to destroy places in the Middle East, the troops weren't wearing the proper protective material for what we were going up against. And DOD knew, the Regal report knew of all these agents that we had given them. And we were strategically trying to take it out by air, by ground.
What do you mean? What do you mean, Venus, when you say Regal? Because what is Regal?
Senator Regal in 19.
Senator Regal.
Yes, Senator Regal.
Okay, that's what you mean by the Regal report, because I had no idea what you were referencing
You
there.
put in Gulf War, Senator Regal report. He had a huge hearing.
Okay.
And he's the only time that mentioned that mycoplasma, which was the general bacteria for pneumonia. Okay, but of course, DOD weaponized it. So we have mycoplasma incognitus, which means mycoplasma of an unknown variety. It's a variety that's got a patent to it, okay? And the patent is owned by DOD. So we created this. This is just one agent. And we did not want Saddam using it on NATO forces. So our idea was to go blow it up and destroy it. But they didn't tell the people who were doing that how to protect themselves as they were doing this. So that's why we had things in the air, we had things in the water, we had contaminations on the ground. We had, go back and look at what RAND said, our RAND Corporation, which is a think tank in Washington. And they study anything that the Pentagon, the government says is interesting. And they looked at our chemical suits, our MOP suit, protective suits. And it was rated from the manufacturer to be effective for one attack or 48 hours, whichever came first. So if you were in that MOP suit for more than 48 hours, it was no good. I was told to put the same MOP suit on at least 6 times, okay?
Yeah.
But it was it had expired. Its protective materials in it had expired within the first 24 hours.
Because
Okay,
they didn't
then
have
after,
replacements for them, just like they didn't have replacements for our masks and everything else.
Right, right.
yes,
And that's just
when
it.
when I say the suit, I mean the mask. The filters in the mask was supposed to be changed. There's a rubber seal on the outside of the mask that was supposed to be changed after 48 hours. The jackets, the boots, and the gloves was supposed to be replaced after 48 hours. I have not yet met anyone that had. They might have come into country with 2 suits, and usually they have to give up the first one to someone else who didn't even have one. So I have
I'll
not
tell you
met,
what,
after
those,
all these years, anyone who had a second
those
suit.
and those boots were just absolutely ridiculous. Why didn't they just give us regular? But they made them. It was ridiculous, absolutely insane. Those boots, you know, no more than a plastic rubber boot with some flaps on the bottom that you tied up above. I'm like, who idiot came up with that ingenious?
We didn't get that.
Huh?
We didn't get that.
You didn't get that?
It was a full suit. You should have gotten that.
No, I
Someday.
remember putting it on, and I remembered, well, how the hell is this going to cover up my feet? That I remember. Maybe I should say that I remember. But I will tell you this: I remember doing a few saltwater washdowns. While our ships had sprinkler systems, and they do a freshwater washdown, saltwater washdown.
Mhm.
And that was why we're out there. I used to think that's weird. Why? And it's not because you want to keep the ship clean. Shit, we were a supply ship. We're going to get supplies on the next day. It's going to look like crap anyway. So I wonder maybe if that had something to do with it. Like they were like, let's maybe wash down the ship after alarms went off. Let's don't scare the guys. Let's wait a day. Let them run their fingers on the handrails while that shit's in out there and rub it on our heads.
Yeah. Well, you weren't going to get away from it. I just, she was talking about the suits, and like she said, they didn't have replacements. I don't ever remember, seeing replacements. I mean, everybody knows that anybody that was in the masks and the filters for the masks were just ridiculously difficult to get in and out. And now I guess they're a screw-in type. But back then it was a pain in the ass to change them out. We'd have to prove that we could change them out, and it was like it was all kinds of messed
Did
up.
y'all have to go through the classes of what different agents were out there? Blister agent, nerve agent, and okay.
Yes.
I remember.
Probably.
I
don't remember, but probably.
Yeah, I remember going through that, and I remember, oh my God, the one thing for sure I didn't want the blister agent. That's for damn sure. But the one thing I remember going through a mine class and how to spot a mine, how many mines were out there. My biggest thing is shit, I ain't scared of that floating mine. I'm scared of the ones that's under the water that go with vibration and everything. I was like, I remember going through. That's what made me go, I want to be on a minesweeper.
Oh,
Yeah.
you wanted to be on a minesweeper?
I did. That's what I wanted, but they wouldn't give it to me, so I got out. Man, I wanted to scoop up mines. I wanted to learn to take them apart. I was very fascinated with mines.
No, no. We were being in engineers, we were gonna push come to shove, we were gonna have to, go along and physically minesweep, like dig for them via your hand. And I remember I said that actually was kind of the least of my worries. And I think I say it at least once every 3 or 4 times on here. My biggest concern was chemicals, and here we are.
Right. Well, I mean,
that was my number one concern.
Well, John, you could easily say, wait a second, you don't want to go to Army or Marines because you didn't want to get shot at, but you want to go play with these big ass mines and take them apart and learn about them.
Yeah, because if they go boom, that's it. It's all over.
Yeah.
That's like going airborne.
Things that make you go.
I mean, yeah, Wade loves. I mean, Wade was talking, about the airborne thing. I've never jumped out of a perfectly good airplane, but kudos to those guys, just like a dope on a rope, flying, jumping out of a helicopter on a rope. That was something I would have been interested in. Of course, it's
Yeah.
not. Some might argue the point. Well, it's no more near as glorious as jumping out of an aircraft, and I mean, but nonetheless, some people are just after the tab.
I,
Oh, it looks good on my uniform.
I'm telling
I'm
you
not
right
saying all, so
now,
don't get bent out of shape if you
I
have
didn't
that.
want anything dangerous on any uniform.
Nothing
Oh,
dangerous.
I
yeah.
don't want to be.
That
You are in the uniform, so Kevin, it was already dangerous because you were wearing military uniforms.
Well, I mean, right, but I mean, I didn't care about having a patch on my side. I mean, we didn't wear patches like that, but I didn't, like everybody's like, have you ever been on a sub? No, hell no.
hmm
If they would have put my ass on a sub, my ass would have been out real quick.
hmm
Because I
No,
mean,
no interest in going under the water.
no, hell no. Why the hell do I want? I, I would have been one of the ones who had to drive that thing. That would have been right full rudder. I would have went left, and my ass would have hit a rock. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I'm just. That's how Sometimes I remember them going right full rudder, and I'd spin the wheel to the left, and they're like, "Right, Simon." Oh shit, right, and I go back right. And so,
Your other right.
yeah, yeah. No, they
I
didn't say.
wanted to reach out to I'm still trying to catch up with people who have been in the 85th evac, because there was one night on the Saudi Kuwaiti border when that's where the 85th evac was, and I was further up in Kuwait, and I didn't know a chemical alarm had gone off. I had been listening to the radio. I heard some chatter of movement, and now I'm sergeant of the guard, and we're walking around this civilian compound where we had troops living, and I had never had any breathing problems, and I started to feel like I was having an asthma heart attack. So, of course, they get you all wired up. If you're the senior NCO, you don't want to go on sick call. Well, I didn't want to go on sick call, but then I collapsed. So I ended up in 85th evac. And when I woke up, this evacuation hospital was full. They were busy. They're going like, "What's going on out there? Why is it are we having all these people in tonight with breathing problems?" So they just treated me as if I had asthma, which I never had before. They treated everybody for that. And then as soon as they got on their feet, they went back out to work. Okay, I went back to my assignment then. Um, did you hear about the National Guardsmen at Pennsylvania at their barracks that got hit by a scud? Okay,
No.
this is back in January. It's one of the few Saudi scuds that actually hit anything. Well, a lot of them that fell different places, but this one actually hit a barracks. And we had a lot of troops coming in, and I had seen them going in and out, and some of them wanted to come into my building, and I'm going like, nope, it's the end of my shift. I'm going out for a cigarette. And nope, you can't stay here. So I sent them to this other barracks just down the street. And if I only knew what was going to happen at this barracks. So I went down to the second barracks where the Pennsylvania troops were, and I was about to walk in there because I was looking for some cigarettes, and something said, "Nope, don't do that yet." And I loitered outside the building, and then I heard a whistle. I saw the flash, and I was knocked. And I kind of did like a radar thing. As I heard the whistle, I started to mask. So I wasn't going in the building because I'm putting on the mask. By the time I could count to 10 to turn around to go towards the building is exploding.
Wow.
So the building's exploding. It's on fire. I see troops coming out. I had been knocked off my feet for a moment or two, or three, but anyhow, when I came back up, I had prescription inserts in my mask. One popped out, one shattered. So you were useless. So I ripped the mask off. And then I went back to, even though I'm supposed to be paralegal, you just don't stop being a medic just because they train you to be a paralegal. I went in, I started bringing people out of the building. People were still smoking. So I was doing that for the rest of the night. Other troops in the area came and they were carrying him to the closest evac hospitals. And then I ended up at 85th evac, because at this time, instead of a patient, I worked as a medic for the next 24, 32 hours after the event. And a doctor looked at me and said, "You're still on your feet?" And I said, yes. It was mostly shock, but they needed the hands. And then after he said, "No, you're too tired. Go home." Go home. I mean, I wish I could go back to your own. I went back to my legal unit, and they're going like, "We're looking for you. We knew you were in the area. We thought you were dead. Where were you? You probably ran away and hid." I don't know why they said that. I said, "I'm a girl from New York City. I did not run away and hide. I was working at the evac hospital." And they're going like, "Oh yeah, sure." And they just let you go home. So they were saying, "We're going to have to write this up." I'm going like, I've never been written up for anything in my life. And I said, I'm not going to be the JAG getting written up by JAG. So I went back to the hospital and I found the doctor who dismissed me. And getting back and forth, it's still like an hour finding transportation. And I got him, things had slowed down. And I told him what my legal unit was saying, that I was missing. And he said, "No, I'm not even going to stand for that." So Dr. Marshall came back with me to my unit, and he went back to my lawyer's office, and he said, "Step outside." And then I could hear him. They were two lieutenant colonels, so they're E6s, 06s, and he tore him a new asshole, and came out. And then I got called into the room, and they said, "I'm sorry I said that about your behavior." He says, I'll write your Bronze Star when you get home." And so I didn't realize how long it was. It was so long that I was missing, that I was on my feet and working. And my legal unit had done a walk around looking for me. They didn't find me because I was now at the evac hospital. I wasn't in the burnt building. They were really grateful about that. But they called my home in America, in Boston, okay? On CNN, it's on the news. A barracks blew up. Guardsmen have been injured, and other troops in the area. Because when I heard that, I said, "You called home?" So I called my home. My family, they're all in tears. They're a wreck. They thought because my unit was calling me then, calling to find out they had heard from me, that I was dead.
That's
I'll
crazy.
never forgive that. My family was traumatized by that.
I want to tell you
It was
what.
better not knowing than to get a call saying, "Have you heard from her?" Because we don't know where she is.
Oh yeah, she just called us from middle of Iraq, after the bombings went off. Kind of crap is that? Well, we're coming up to the end of the program. Venus, thank you for coming back on. It is definitely a pleasure meeting you and talking with you. And John, always a pleasure looking at your good-looking bald head over there.
Baldy. Yeah.
But Venus, thank you for coming on the program. I'm going to thank everybody for listening. And, y'all have a great night. God bless.
Yes, come back. I want to hear everyone's stories.
Thank you for listening to Go For Side Effects. If you have a story or you would like to share or just come on with any comments or questions, please email me at kevinsimon@goforesideeffects.com.